The ocean mist clung to Mission Beach as Emily Martinez left her best friend's graduation celebration. It was nearly midnight when the 19-year-old college student climbed into her white Honda Civic, her dark curls dampened by the coastal fog. Friends watched her headlights disappear into the San Diego night. By dawn, her bed remained empty, her car nowhere to be found. What happened to Emily that foggy night would remain shrouded in darkness for over 2 decades, haunting America's finest city with one of its darkest mysteries. On the evening of August 12, 1998, the coastal communities of San Diego buzzed with summer energy. Mission Beach, with its iconic roller coaster and bustling boardwalk, was alive with tourists and locals enjoying the perfect weather. Among them was Emily Martinez, a bright sophomore at San Diego State University, recognizable by her warm smile and thoughtful nature. The graduation party at her friend Sophia Chen's beachfront apartment had been relatively small, about 15 college friends celebrating Sophia's summer graduation before she left for law school. Emily, wearing a navy SDSU sweatshirt and light jeans, had remained mostly sober, having volunteered to drive 2 friends home later. At 11:42 p.m., Emily hugged Sophia goodbye on the apartment's small balcony overlooking the ocean. "I'll call you tomorrow about that museum exhibit," she said, according to witnesses. Emily then walked down to the dimly lit parking area where her white Honda Civic waited. 3 friends saw her unlock the car, slide into the driver's seat, and pull away from the curb. What no one noticed in the darkness was a dark SUV that pulled out shortly after Emily, following at a careful distance as she headed east toward the interstate. The night swallowed both vehicles as fog rolled in from the Pacific. By 9 a.m. the next morning, Maria Martinez stood in her daughter's empty bedroom, the bed still made from the day before. Emily's toothbrush remained in the bathroom cup. Her backpack sat by the desk where she had left it. Maria called Emily's cell phone repeatedly, each ring ending in voicemail. This behavior was completely out of character for her responsible, punctual daughter. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. By noon, Maria and her husband Ricardo had called every friend they could think of. No one had seen Emily since she left the party. Sophia confirmed Emily had planned to drive straight home. At 2 p.m., the Martinez family reported their daughter missing to the San Diego Police Department. Detective James Moreno arrived at the Martinez home by 3 p.m. The veteran officer took careful notes as Maria described her daughter, 5'6". Athletic build, shoulder-length dark hair, and a small birthmark near her right wrist. Ricardo provided a recent photo of Emily smiling on Coronado Beach, the sun highlighting the natural glow of her face. "She wouldn't just disappear," Maria insisted, her voice breaking. "She has a biology exam on Monday that she's been studying for all week, and she always calls if she's going to be late." Moreno nodded, his expression grave. 20 years on the force had taught him when to worry. This was one of those times. Within an hour, patrol officers were dispatched throughout the city, searching for Emily's white Honda Civic. Missing person flyers appeared on storefront windows, telephone poles, and community boards across San Diego. The initial investigation focused on 3 possible scenarios. First, an accident. Perhaps Emily had driven off one of the winding coastal roads in the fog. Second, a voluntary disappearance, though everyone who knew Emily immediately dismissed this theory. The third and most troubling possibility, abduction. By nightfall, San Diego's evening news broadcasts featured Emily's smiling face. 19-year-old SDSU student missing since last night, read the captions under her photo. Local radio stations described her car, encouraging listeners to report any sightings. The community responded with concern. Phone lines at the police department buzzed with tips, most leading nowhere. Meanwhile, search teams combed the routes between Mission Beach and the Martinez home in Tierra Santa. Officers walked along guardrails and embankments, looking for any sign of an accident. Harbor police checked waterfront areas where a car might have gone into the bay. Helicopter units scanned canyons and remote areas. Nothing turned up. Emily's friends organized their own search parties, distributing flyers throughout college areas and shopping centers. Social media was still in its infancy in 1998, but early internet forums buzzed with concern for the missing student. Professors at SDSU made announcements in classes, asking anyone with information to come forward. Detective Moreno established a timeline of Emily's last known movements. She had arrived at the party around 7 p.m. Multiple witnesses confirmed she had only one beer early in the evening. She played board games, helped serve cake, and spent time talking about her plans to apply for a marine biology research program. Nothing seemed amiss. Her last phone call had been to her mother at 9:13 p.m., saying she would be home by midnight. Security footage from a gas station near Mission Beach showed her car passing at 11:47 p.m., 5 minutes after she left the party. After that, both Emily and her white Honda vanished. As days turned into weeks, the investigation hit frustrating dead ends. Emily's bank accounts remained untouched, her credit cards unused. Her cell phone had gone dead shortly after midnight on August 13th, its last ping coming from a tower near Tecolote Canyon Natural Park, slightly off the route she should have taken home. This detail troubled investigators. Why would Emily have been near the canyon after midnight? The area was known for its hiking trails, but was typically deserted after dark. Search teams with cadaver dogs combed the canyon for days, but found nothing connected to the case. The Martinez family refused to give up hope. They appeared on local and national news programs, pleading for information. Ricardo, his voice breaking, looked directly into the cameras. "Emily, if you can see this, please come home. If anyone knows anything, please help us find our daughter." By October 1998, the active investigation began to slow. Detective Moreno was reassigned to other cases, though he continued to follow up on leads in his spare time. The missing person flyers, once crisp and new, faded in the San Diego sun. For the Martinez family, life entered a painful limbo. They maintained Emily's room exactly as she had left it. Christmas presents remained wrapped and waiting. Her biology textbook sat open on her desk. Maria often slept in her daughter's bed, clutching Emily's favorite childhood stuffed animal. In January 1999, the last potential lead dried up when a reported sighting in Northern California proved false. The case file for Emily Martinez was moved to the Cold Case Division, joining hundreds of other unsolved mysteries. The missing student became another ghostly statistic, one of the thousands of Americans who disappear each year, their fates unknown. As San Diego entered the new millennium, Emily's story faded from public memory. Occasional anniversary pieces in local newspapers kept her name alive, but as years passed, these too became less frequent. The Martinez family established a scholarship in Emily's name at SDSU, ensuring that even as memories dimmed, her legacy would continue. For Detective Moreno, who eventually retired from the force in 2010, Emily Martinez remained his most haunting unsolved case. In his home office, he kept a copy of her file and the timeline he had constructed. Sometimes late at night, he would review his notes, certain he had missed something crucial. The case might have remained cold forever, if not for a revolutionary advance in forensic technology and the determination of a new generation of investigators. In March 2018, 20 years after Emily vanished, the San Diego Police Department established a specialized cold case unit funded by a federal grant. The team, led by Detective Samantha Reyes, was tasked with reviewing unsolved cases using advanced DNA analysis and digital forensics unavailable when the original investigations occurred. One of the first files Reyes pulled was Emily Martinez. Something about the disappearance of the young college student resonated with her. Perhaps it was the similarity in their ages. Reyes had been a freshman in college when Emily vanished. Perhaps it was the complete lack of closure for the family. Whatever the reason, Reyes made Emily's case her personal mission. "These aren't just files," Reyes told her team as they reopened the dusty boxes of evidence. "These are people's lives frozen in time. Emily should be 40 now, maybe with a family of her own. Instead, her parents have spent 2 decades wondering what happened that night." Reyes began by re-examining every piece of evidence collected in 1998. She tracked down the original witnesses, now in their 40s, and re-interviewed them. Most remembered the night with surprising clarity, a testament to how deeply Emily's disappearance had affected them. Sophia Chen, now a corporate attorney in Los Angeles, provided an important detail she hadn't emphasized in her original statement. There was a dark SUV parked across the street for most of the evening, she recalled. I remember thinking it was odd because the same vehicle had been there the previous night when I was taking out trash. I assumed it belonged to a neighbor. With this seemingly minor detail, sent Reyes back to the original security footage from businesses near Mission Beach. Most had been recorded over or discarded years ago, but a backup archive at the police department contained digital copies of some tapes. Enhanced with modern technology, the grainy images revealed a dark Ford Explorer following Emily's Honda at a distance. Though the license plate wasn't visible, this was the first new lead in decades. Reyes expanded her search to include any similar vehicles involved in suspicious activity around that time. She compiled a database of Ford Explorer owners in the county in 1998, cross-referencing with criminal records. Meanwhile, the team requested a modern reanalysis of physical evidence. Though limited, the original investigators had collected items from Emily's room and samples from her hairbrush and toothbrush. New touch DNA techniques might reveal something previously missed. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. In June 2018, the Martinez family received an unexpected visit from Detective Reyes. Maria, now in her 60s, hair streaked with gray, invited the detective into the house that had remained largely unchanged since 1998. Emily's graduation photo still held the central place on the mantel. We've reopened Emily's case, Reyes explained gently. New technology gives us tools we didn't have before. I can't promise anything, but we're looking at everything again with fresh eyes. For the first time in years, a fragile hope flickered in Maria's expression. Ricardo, who had suffered a heart attack 5 years earlier, gripped his wife's hand tightly. Please, he said simply, please find our daughter. The investigation gained momentum when analysts at the forensic lab made a breakthrough. Using advanced techniques to extract DNA from items in Emily's car, recovered from her parking space at the apartment, they identified genetic material not belonging to Emily or any known friends. The sample was degraded, but sufficient to run through expanded DNA databases not available in the 1990s. July brought the first major breakthrough. The DNA partially matched a sample in the system, not a direct match, but close enough to suggest a familial connection. The sample belonged to a man named Victor Ramirez, arrested in 2015 for assault. But Victor would have been only 14 in 1998, too young to be the driver of the SUV. Reyes shifted focus to Victor's family members. His father, Raymond Ramirez, had died in 2010, but his uncle, Gabriel Ramirez, had owned a dark Ford Explorer in 1998. More importantly, Gabriel had worked as a maintenance supervisor at several apartment complexes in San Diego, including one just blocks from Mission Beach. Background checks revealed Gabriel Ramirez had been questioned in connection with a series of break-ins in 1997, but was never charged. He had moved to Arizona in 2000 and maintained a clean record since then. Now 64, he lived quietly in Phoenix. Detective Reyes flew to Arizona to interview Gabriel Ramirez. The initial conversation revealed nothing incriminating. Ramirez claimed to have no knowledge of Emily Martinez and denied being in the Mission Beach area that night. He permitted a DNA sample, which was rushed back to San Diego for analysis. The results confirmed Reyes's suspicions. Gabriel Ramirez's DNA matched the sample from Emily's car. When confronted with this evidence during a second interview, Ramirez's composure cracked. He requested an attorney, ending the interview, but the damage was done. A search warrant for Ramirez's property was quickly obtained. In his garage, investigators made a chilling discovery. Hidden beneath floorboards was a box containing items that appeared to be trophies from victims, jewelry, student ID cards, and most damning of all, a SDSU keychain with Emily's initials engraved on the back. As evidence mounted, the San Diego District Attorney authorized Gabriel Ramirez's arrest. Extradited to California, he faced charges related to Emily's disappearance. But the most important question remained unanswered. What had happened to Emily, and where was she now? The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Ramirez's ex-wife, contacted by investigators, revealed that in late 1998, Gabriel had suddenly insisted on filling in an old well on a remote property he owned in East County, San Diego. The property had since been sold, but records confirmed Ramirez had owned the land at the time of Emily's disappearance. On September 15, 2018, a search team arrived at the property in Jamul, about 30 miles east of San Diego. Using ground-penetrating radar, they identified an anomaly consistent with a filled-in well. As excavation began, a somber mood fell over the scene. Detective Reyes stood watching, her face set in grim determination. 3 feet down, workers discovered concrete had been poured into the well. Breaking through this layer revealed a terrible truth: human remains wrapped in plastic sheeting. Dental records would later confirm what investigators already feared. They had found Emily Martinez. The medical examiner determined Emily had died from blunt force trauma to the head. Evidence suggested she had been abducted after leaving the party, likely forced off the road by someone who had been watching her. The proximity to Tecolote Canyon matched the last cell phone ping from her phone. When confronted with the mounting evidence, Gabriel Ramirez finally confessed. Through his attorney, he admitted to following Emily for several days before the abduction. He had noticed her at the apartment complex where he worked and developed an obsession. On August 12, 1998, he followed her from the party, forced her car off the road near the canyon, and abducted her. After murdering Emily, he disposed of her body in the well and her car in a chop shop that has since been closed. The confession brought a wave of emotion through the San Diego community. For those who remembered the original disappearance, it reopened old wounds. For Emily's friends, now in their 40s with families of their own, it provided long-sought answers, but little comfort. For Maria and Ricardo Martinez, the news was both devastating and strangely relieving. For 20 years we've lived in limbo, Maria told reporters, her voice steady despite her tears. Every phone call, every knock at the door, I thought it might be Emily. Now at least we know. Now at least we can bring her home. Emily Martinez was laid to rest in October 2018, 20 years after she vanished. Hundreds attended the service, including Detective Moreno, now retired, and Detective Reyes, whose determination had finally brought the case to closure. Sophia Chen delivered a moving eulogy, speaking of the bright young woman whose life had been cut tragically short. In March 2019, Gabriel Ramirez pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As he was led from the courtroom, Ricardo Martinez stood, looking directly at the man who had stolen his daughter. No words were exchanged, but the moment spoke volumes about justice delayed but finally delivered. The Emily Martinez case fundamentally changed how San Diego law enforcement approached cold cases. The successful resolution led to increased funding for the cold case unit and the adoption of new technologies for evidence re-examination. Within 2 years, the unit had solved 5 additional long-dormant cases, bringing closure to other families trapped in similar limbo. At San Diego State University, the Emily Martinez Memorial Scholarship was expanded to support students studying forensic science, ensuring that Emily's legacy would help train future generations of investigators who might bring closure to other families. For Detective Reyes, the case marked the beginning of a specialized career in cold case investigation. These cases are never truly cold, as long as someone remembers, she often tells new recruits. Our job is to be the memory of the department, to keep promising those left behind that we haven't forgotten. San Diego buzzed with the news of Gabriel Ramirez's arrest. The story dominated local headlines as details emerged about the man who had lived among them for years while hiding a terrible secret. For 2 decades, he had maintained a facade of normalcy while the Martinez family lived in agony. Now, as his case moved through the justice system, the community struggled to process how such evil could hide in plain sight in America's finest city. Detective Samantha Reyes became the public face of the investigation. Her methodical approach and deep commitment to finding the truth resonated with San Diegans. At a press conference outside police headquarters, she spoke with quiet determination. "Cold cases are never truly cold," she told the gathered reporters, cameras flashing in the bright California sunshine. "They're simply waiting for the right technology, the right detective, and the right moment to reveal their secrets." Emily waited 20 years for justice. Other victims are still waiting. Behind the scenes, the cold case unit continued their meticulous work. The evidence recovered from Ramirez's home and the well site painted a disturbing picture. Journals revealed he had stalked several young women over the years, though Emily appeared to be his only murder victim. The keychain found in his possession was just one of many trophies he had kept, small items stolen from women who never realized they were being watched. The discovery prompted the police department to review other unsolved cases for potential connections. 3 additional disappearances shared similarities with Emily's case, though none could be definitively linked to Ramirez. Still, investigators continued to probe, determined that if there were other victims, they too would find justice. For Maria and Ricardo Martinez, the arrest brought a complex mix of emotions. The confirmation of their daughter's death extinguished the tiny flame of hope they had nurtured for 2 decades. Yet it also brought a strange relief, an end to the torturous uncertainty that had defined their lives since 1998. For 20 years, I jumped every time the phone rang, Maria told a local newspaper. Part of me was always waiting for Emily to walk through the door. Now I know she won't. It breaks my heart all over again, but at least now I know. The Martinez home became a gathering place for Emily's friends, now adults with careers and families of their own, who came to share memories and offer support. Sophia Chen, who had carried guilt about that night for years, spent hours with Maria looking through old photo albums. The images of Emily, smiling at the beach, laughing at her high school graduation, studying at the library, preserved a life full of promise and joy. She was so excited about marine biology, Sophia recalled, gently touching a photo of Emily, examining tide pools at La Jolla Cove. She had this theory about how certain algae could be used in medicine. She was brilliant. As the case against Gabriel Ramirez solidified, prosecutors worked closely with the Martinez family. District Attorney Eleanor Torres personally handled the case, recognizing its significance to the community. Her office built a meticulous timeline, combining physical evidence, DNA, witness statements, and Ramirez's partial confession into an airtight case. This isn't just about punishing one man, Torres explained to the Martinez family during a private meeting. This is about setting a precedent for cold cases everywhere, about showing that time doesn't erase accountability. The legal proceedings moved forward with deliberate care. Each hearing drew media attention, with courtroom sketches of Ramirez appearing on nightly news broadcasts. The once invisible maintenance worker now sat exposed under the harsh lights of justice, his shoulders hunched as if trying to disappear back into anonymity. Ramirez's defense team initially explored an insanity plea, but abandoned it after psychological evaluations showed he was fully aware of his actions. The journals recovered from his home revealed calculated planning rather than impulsive behavior. He had chosen Emily specifically, watching her routine for weeks before making his move. The premeditation would prove damning. In November 2018, as San Diego prepared for Thanksgiving, an unexpected development shifted the case dynamics. Facing overwhelming evidence and the prospect of a trial that would expose every detail of his crimes, Ramirez agreed to plead guilty in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. Prosecutors, after consulting with the Martinez family, accepted the deal. "No punishment can bring Emily back," Ricardo said when asked about the plea agreement. "What matters to us is that he will never harm another family, that he will die behind bars, thinking about what he did to our daughter." The guilty plea spared the Martinez family the trauma of a lengthy trial, but left many questions unanswered. Ramirez admitted to abducting and killing Emily, but provided few details about the crime itself. For investigators, the gaps in his confession suggested he was still hiding aspects of that night, perhaps to maintain some sense of control. Detective Reyes wasn't satisfied. "A confession without full disclosure isn't closure," she noted in her case files. "There are still pieces missing from this puzzle." Her instincts would prove correct in ways no one anticipated. In January 2019, as prosecutors prepared for Ramirez's sentencing hearing, an unexpected call came to the cold case unit. A woman named Vanessa Wilkins, watching news coverage of the case from her home in Oregon, recognized Gabriel Ramirez as someone from her past. She had a story to tell, one that would add a shocking new dimension to the investigation. Reyes flew to Portland to meet Vanessa in person. In a quiet coffee shop, the woman shared a revelation that sent ripples through the case. In 1998, Vanessa had been a secretary at the same apartment complex where Ramirez worked. She recalled seeing him talking to another maintenance worker on the night Emily disappeared. The conversation had seemed intense, almost heated. "I remember because it was unusual to see them there so late," Vanessa explained, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug. "They were in the maintenance shed, arguing about something. I was working late in the office and saw them through the window." The other man, according to Vanessa, was Michael Horvath, another maintenance worker who had left San Diego around the same time as Ramirez. She hadn't thought much of it at the time, but watching the news coverage triggered the memory. "I always thought it was odd that they both left their jobs within months of each other," she added. "Michael went to Nevada, I think. We weren't close, but everyone noticed when the two best maintenance guys quit around the same time." This new information electrified the investigation. Could Ramirez have had an accomplice? The idea that two men might have been involved in Emily's abduction and murder opened troubling new possibilities. It might explain certain inconsistencies in the evidence, like how Emily's car had disappeared so thoroughly while Ramirez's SUV was spotted following her. Detective Reyes immediately launched a search for Michael Horvath. Records showed he had indeed moved to Nevada in early 1999, worked various maintenance jobs in Las Vegas, and then seemingly vanished from official records around 2010. No death certificate, no further employment history, no property records. It was as if Michael Horvath had deliberately disappeared. The search hit a roadblock until a facial recognition program matched an old employee photo of Horvath with a driver's license issued in Montana under the name Michael Healy. The license, issued in 2011, led investigators to a remote cabin outside Missoula where the man now lived as a recluse. Montana State Police assisted in surveillance of the property. For 3 days, officers watched as the man now known as Michael Healy went about a solitary existence. He rarely left the cabin, appeared to have no visitors, and spent hours sitting on his porch staring into the dense forest surrounding his property. When they finally moved in to question him, Healy didn't resist. Sitting at his kitchen table, hands folded calmly, he seemed almost relieved when detectives identified themselves. "I've been expecting someone for 20 years, he said quietly. "I'm surprised it took this long." Detective Reyes, who had flown to Montana for the interview, recognized the significance of those words. This wasn't a man surprised by accusations, but one who had been waiting for his past to catch up with him. Over the next 6 hours, Michael Horvath, he readily admitted his real identity, revealed a story that completed the puzzle of Emily Martinez's disappearance. According to Horvath, he and Ramirez had developed a friendship based on their shared interest in following and watching young women. For months, they had engaged in stalking behavior, photographing women without their knowledge and sharing their collections. It was a sick game that escalated when Ramirez became fixated on Emily. Gabriel talked about her constantly, Horvath explained, his voice flat and emotionless. He knew her schedule, where she shopped, who her friends were. It went beyond our usual activities. He was obsessed. On the night of August 12, 1998, Ramirez had convinced Horvath to help him talk to Emily. The plan, as Horvath understood it, was to follow her, force her car to stop, and then Ramirez would approach her. Horvath claimed he didn't know Ramirez intended to harm her. "I was in my truck behind Gabriel's Explorer," he continued. "When Emily left the party, we followed her. Near Tecolote Canyon, Gabriel pulled up beside her and forced her off the road. I pulled up behind them." What happened next still haunted Horvath. When Emily refused to get out of her car, Ramirez became enraged. He smashed her window with a tire iron and dragged her from the vehicle. When she screamed, he struck her with the iron, the blow killing her instantly. "I never wanted that," Horvath insisted, though his involvement was clear. "When I saw what he did, I panicked. Gabriel said we had to hide her. He knew about the well on his property." The two men transported Emily's body in Ramirez's SUV, while Horvath drove her Honda to a chop shop operated by another acquaintance. By dawn, both men had returned to their apartments. The only evidence of their crime washed away with soap and water at the maintenance shed sink. Horvath's confession explained the partial DNA evidence found in Emily's car. Both men had been inside it at different points. It explained how Emily's vehicle had disappeared so completely, while witnesses only recalled seeing the SUV. Most importantly, it revealed the full truth of that night, the details Ramirez had withheld, even in his guilty plea. With Horvath's statement recorded, Montana police placed him under arrest. Extradition proceedings began immediately to return him to California to face charges as an accomplice to murder. The revelation of a second perpetrator shocked the San Diego community and added a new layer of complexity to an already painful case. For the Martinez family, Horvath's confession brought fresh anguish. The knowledge that two men had been responsible for their daughter's death, that her final moments had been even more terrifying than imagined, reopened wounds barely beginning to heal. "How do you process something like this?" Maria asked when Detective Reyes delivered the news. "Just when we thought we knew the worst, there's more horror to face." The cold case unit worked quickly to incorporate Horvath's confession into their understanding of the crime. His account matched physical evidence in ways Ramirez's partial confession had not. The tire iron, which Horvath claimed had been thrown into the ocean off Point Loma, explained the pattern of Emily's fatal injury. The chop shop connection explained why no trace of her car had ever been found. District Attorney Torres amended the charges against Ramirez to include conspiracy and added an obstruction of justice charge for his deliberate omission of Horvath's involvement. The court granted the amendments, ensuring Ramirez would face the full extent of his crimes during sentencing. When confronted with Horvath's confession, Ramirez initially denied having an accomplice. But faced with specific details only someone present could know, his denials crumbled. In a supplemental statement, he admitted Horvath's involvement, but attempted to cast him as the primary aggressor, a claim contradicted by both the evidence and Horvath's confession. The media descended on the case with renewed interest. National news programs ran special features on the San Diego stalkers and how the case had evolved from a single disappearance to the uncovering of a predatory partnership. True crime podcasts dissected every detail, sometimes sensationalizing aspects in ways that distressed the Martinez family. In response, Detective Reyes became increasingly protective of case details and the family's privacy. She limited press access and refused to speculate on aspects still under investigation. Her focus remained singular, building the strongest possible cases against both men to ensure neither would ever walk free. "This isn't entertainment," she reminded her team during a case briefing. "This is Emily's life and death. This is the Martinez family's ongoing pain. We owe them dignity in how we handle this. As spring bloomed across San Diego in 2019, the legal proceedings accelerated. Michael Horvath was extradited to California and formally charged as an accomplice to first-degree murder. Unlike Ramirez, he showed genuine remorse during court appearances, often with tears streaming down his face as the charges were read. His attorney negotiated a plea deal in exchange for his continued cooperation and testimony against Ramirez if needed. The agreement ensured Horvath would serve at least 30 years before any possibility of parole, a sentence that would likely mean he would die in prison given his age. On May 15, 2019, both men appeared for sentencing in a San Diego courtroom, packed with media, community members, and Emily's family and friends. The judge, Honorable Caroline Mendoza, had reviewed the case files thoroughly, including both men's confessions and all forensic evidence. Her expression remained stoic as the proceedings began, but her voice carried the weight of the community's collective grief. The Martinez family was given the opportunity to speak before sentencing. Ricardo, now using a cane and looking much older than his years, approached the podium with Maria at his side. Their remaining daughter, Lucia, stood behind them, her hand on her mother's shoulder. 20 years ago, we lost our beautiful Emily, Ricardo began, his voice steady despite the emotion visible on his face. She was studying to save the oceans. She volunteered at the Children's Hospital. She called her grandmother every Sunday without fail. She was the kind of person who made this world better just by being in it. He paused, looking directly at Ramirez and Horvath. You took her from us for no reason, except your own twisted desires. You watched her die and buried her like garbage. Then you lived your lives while we searched and prayed and hoped for 20 years. Maria stepped forward, her voice breaking as she held up a photo of Emily. This is who you killed. Not just a name in your sick fantasy or a body you discarded. This was our daughter. She had dreams and love and a future. Remember her face when you're sitting in your cells. Remember what you stole from this world. Judge Mendoza thanked the family and then addressed the defendants. She spoke about the heinousness of the crime, the calculated nature of the stalking that preceded it, and the decades-long cover-up that followed. She emphasized that while Horvath had eventually assisted justice, his initial participation and years of silence demanded severe punishment. Gabriel Ramirez, this court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, she declared, her gavel striking with finality. Michael Horvath, in accordance with your plea agreement, this court sentences you to 40 years imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years served. As the sentences were pronounced, a quiet sob escaped from Maria Martinez. It was not joy or even relief, merely the sound of a chapter finally closing on the longest, most painful journey a parent could endure. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. The district attorney spoke briefly about the importance of never giving up on cold cases. Detective Reyes declined to comment, instead quietly escorting the Martinez family to their car, shielding them from the cameras and questions. Later that evening, a candlelight vigil formed spontaneously at Mission Beach, near where Emily had last been seen alive. Hundreds gathered, many who had never known her, but had followed the case and been touched by her story. Students from SDSU brought marine biology textbooks and laid them alongside flowers and photos, honoring the career she never got to pursue. As darkness fell over the ocean, the beach glowed with hundreds of lights. Sophia Chen, who had organized the gathering through social media, addressed the crowd. Emily loved this beach, she said, her voice carrying over the sound of the waves. She loved studying the tide pools and telling anyone who would listen about the amazing ecosystems just beneath the surface. Tonight, we're not just remembering how she died. We're celebrating how she lived. The vigil marked a turning point for San Diego's relationship with the case. What had been a dark mystery, a source of fear and speculation, transformed into a catalyst for community action. In the following months, students at SDSU established a safety program in Emily's name, providing escorts for students walking alone at night. Local businesses funded additional security lighting in beach areas and campus surroundings. For Detective Reyes and the Cold Case Unit, Emily's case became both a validation of their work and a template for future investigations. The successful resolution demonstrated how advances in technology could breathe new life into decades-old evidence. It highlighted the importance of revisiting witness statements with fresh perspectives and the power of modern DNA analysis. In July 2019, the police department expanded the unit, adding 2 more detectives and a dedicated forensic technician. Their mission expanded beyond homicides to include long unsolved disappearances and sexual assaults. Cases once considered hopelessly cold were pulled from storage and re-examined with new techniques and renewed determination. Reyes herself became a sought-after speaker at law enforcement conferences, sharing the methodologies that had cracked the Martinez case. Her presentations emphasized the importance of maintaining evidence properly, even in cases that seemed unlikely to be solved. Technology will continue to advance, she often told audiences of fellow officers. A hair sample that tells us nothing today might reveal everything tomorrow. Her job is to preserve the truth until science catches up to it. The case also sparked important conversations about community safety and awareness. Local news stations ran special reports on recognizing stalking behavior and the importance of reporting suspicious activities. Self-defense classes filled up with young women determined to protect themselves. Parents initiated more open discussions with their children about personal safety without fostering paralyzing fear. For Maria and Ricardo Martinez, life would never return to normal. The pain of losing Emily had been compounded by 20 years of uncertainty, then further traumatized by the brutal details of her final moments. Yet in the aftermath of the sentencing, they found a new purpose that helped channel their grief. With the help of Lucia and Emily's former professors, they expanded the scholarship established in their daughter's name. What had been a small annual award for one marine biology student grew into a substantial program supporting research in the field Emily had loved. Each year, the Emily Martinez Memorial Scholars worked on conservation projects along the San Diego coastline, continuing the work she would have done. Maria began speaking to parents of other missing children, offering support forged in the crucible of her own experience. Though she could never offer promises, she gave something perhaps more valuable, understanding from someone who had walked the same agonizing path. Hope is not foolish, she would tell these families, holding their hands in hers. Even when the worst happens, there is value in the years you spent hoping. It kept Emily alive in our hearts. It kept us searching for the truth. Ricardo focused his energy on working with law enforcement agencies to improve how missing person cases were handled. He advocated for better communication between jurisdictions, standardized evidence collection protocols, and increased funding for cold case units across California. His quiet persistence led to legislative changes that became known informally as Emily's protocols. Detective Reyes maintained contact with the family, stopping by occasionally to share coffee and updates on other cases the unit was pursuing. These visits evolved from professional courtesy to genuine friendship. In Reyes, the Martinez family found someone who understood the importance of Emily's case beyond headlines and statistics. In the Martinezes, Reyes found a reminder of why her often difficult work mattered. As 2019 drew to a close, San Diego had changed in subtle but important ways. The fear that had lingered beneath the surface since Emily's disappearance had been replaced by a more informed vigilance. The community had learned difficult lessons about the darkness that can hide within ordinary lives, but had responded with light rather than more fear. Emily Martinez, who had entered adulthood with dreams of studying the ocean, had instead become part of San Diego's cultural consciousness, a symbol of justice delayed but ultimately served, of a community's responsibility to its most vulnerable members, and of the enduring power of truth to emerge even after decades of darkness. The story of Emily Martinez and the men who took her life continued to resonate throughout San Diego as 2020 approached. What had begun as a tragic cold case had transformed into something more, a catalyst for change in how missing persons cases were handled and how communities protected their most vulnerable members. But beneath the progress and healing, new questions were emerging that would soon reveal the Martinez case had only scratched the surface of a deeper darkness. On a bright January morning in 2020, Detective Samantha Reyes sat in her office reviewing files. The cold case unit had expanded, now occupying a dedicated section of police headquarters with advanced technology and increased personnel. On her desk sat a framed photo of the Martinez family from Emily's memorial service, a reminder of why this work mattered beyond statistics and solved case percentages. Her phone rang, the caller ID showing the San Diego County Medical Examiner's Office. Dr. James Chen, the forensic pathologist who had examined Emily's remains, rarely called unless something significant had developed. "Detective Reyes, we've found something you need to see," Chen said, his usually calm voice tinged with urgency. "It's about the evidence recovered from Horvath's property in Montana. When Horvath had been arrested, investigators had searched his cabin thoroughly. Among the items seized were dozens of journals, photo albums, and digital storage devices. Most contained disturbing but not necessarily criminal content. Voyeuristic photos taken in public places, obsessive writings about women he had observed. The material had been analyzed primarily for evidence relating to Emily Martinez, with other content catalogued but set aside. One of our technicians was completing the final inventory," Chen continued, "and noticed something unusual about a series of photographs. They appear to be trophies, similar to what you found in Ramirez's possession, but they don't match any of the items connected to Emily." Within an hour, Reyes was at the medical examiner's office, looking at enlarged images of jewelry, ID cards, and personal effects photographed with meticulous care. None belonged to Emily Martinez. All appeared to be women's items, suggesting Horvath's criminal behavior might extend beyond his role in Emily's murder. "These could be from burglaries," Reyes suggested, studying a photo of a pearl necklace arranged precisely on a dark cloth. Horvath worked maintenance at several apartment complexes. He would have had access. Dr. Chen nodded, but then pointed to another image. "That's what we thought initially, but look at this." The photograph showed a driver's license belonging to Cynthia Leeson, a 21-year-old woman reported missing in Imperial Beach in 1997, a year before Emily's disappearance. Unlike Emily's case, Cynthia had never been found, her disappearance eventually becoming another cold case in the department's files. "We've identified 3 other missing women whose personal items appear in these photos," Chen added, sliding over a preliminary report. "All disappeared between 1996 and 2000. All were in their early 20s. All cases remain unsolved." Reyes felt a chill despite the officer's warmth. The implications were clear and horrifying. Horvath had presented himself as an unwilling accomplice to Ramirez's single act of violence. These photos suggested something far more sinister, a pattern of behavior that might make him not just an accomplice, but a serial predator. "Has Horvath been informed about this discovery?" Reyes asked, already planning her next steps. "No," Chen replied. "We contacted you immediately. These cases predated our digital cataloging system, so connecting them took manual research. The full report will be ready tomorrow, but I thought you should see this now." Reyes thanked him and returned to headquarters, her mind racing. If Horvath was connected to multiple disappearances, everything he had claimed about his role in Emily's death came into question. His portrayal of himself as a reluctant participant, manipulated by the more aggressive Ramirez, no longer seemed credible. The next morning, Reyes assembled the cold case team for an emergency briefing. She laid out the new evidence and her suspicions, then assigned investigators to re-examine each of the identified missing persons cases. Property records would need to be checked to determine if Horvath had lived or worked near the locations where these women disappeared. "We need to be methodical," she cautioned the team. "These cases are decades old. Evidence may be degraded or missing entirely. Witnesses may have died or moved away. But if Horvath is connected to more victims, we owe it to their families to find the truth." Over the following weeks, the investigation expanded in concentric circles. Cynthia Leeson's case file was pulled from storage, its contents carefully reviewed through the lens of potential connection to Horvath. The parallels to Emily's case were striking. Cynthia had also been a college student, last seen leaving a restaurant near the beach. Her car had been found abandoned in a shopping center parking lot, but no trace of Cynthia herself had ever been discovered. Former investigators who had worked the Leeson case were contacted. Many had retired, but their memories of the frustrating investigation remained vivid. None had considered Horvath a suspect at the time. He hadn't been on their radar, just one of countless maintenance workers in the area. Property records confirmed Horvath had indeed worked at an apartment complex less than 2 miles from where Cynthia was last seen. Employment records showed he had been on duty the evening she disappeared. The circumstantial evidence was compelling, if not yet conclusive. Similar connections emerged in the other cases. Teresa Alvarez, 23, disappeared after a night class at a community college in 1996. Miranda Wong, 20, vanished while jogging in Balboa Park in 1999. Jennifer Reeves, 22, went missing after her shift at a coffee shop in 2000. In each case, Horvath had lived or worked within a 5-mile radius of the disappearance location. As the connections multiplied, Reyes knew it was time to confront Horvath directly. She arranged to interview him at the state prison, where he was serving his sentence for Emily's murder. The man who shuffled into the prison interview room bore little resemblance to the mountain recluse arrested in Montana. Prison had aged him rapidly, his shoulders permanently hunched, his eyes darting nervously. When he saw Reyes, recognition flickered across his face, quickly replaced by wariness. "Detective," he acknowledged, sitting across from her at the metal table. "I've told you everything about the Martinez girl. Why are you here?" Reyes placed a folder on the table but didn't open it. Her training had taught her that sometimes the anticipation of evidence was more effective than the evidence itself. "Michael, we've been going through the items seized from your cabin," she began conversationally. "Interesting collection of photographs you kept, especially the ones of items belonging to women who disappeared in San Diego between 1996 and 2000. Horvath's face remained impassive, but his hands, cuffed in front of him, tightened into fists. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Cynthia Leeson, Teresa Alvarez, Miranda Wong, Jennifer Reeves." Reyes recited the names slowly, watching for reactions. "Any of those names sound familiar?" A muscle twitched in Horvath's jaw. "I want a lawyer." Reyes had anticipated this response. "That's your right. But before we end this conversation, I want you to understand something. We're going to keep digging. We're going to connect you to these women. And when we do, any deal you made regarding Emily Martinez won't protect you from additional charges." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to ensure only Horvath could hear. "In your confession, you portrayed yourself as an unwilling participant, a man who got caught up in Ramirez's obsession. That narrative helped you avoid a life sentence without parole. But if we prove you were involved in other disappearances, especially ones that predate Emily, that narrative falls apart." Horvath remained silent, staring at the table. "We're excavating sites near where you lived during those years," Reyes continued, allowing the implication to hang in the air. It wasn't entirely true. No excavations had begun, but the possibility had been discussed. "I want a lawyer," Horvath repeated, his voice barely audible. Reyes nodded and gathered her folder. "We'll arrange that. In the meantime, think about what I've said. Your sentence allows for parole after 30 years. If we connect you to these other women, you'll never see the outside world again." As she stood to leave, Horvath finally looked up. The nervousness in his eyes had hardened into something colder. "You think you know everything," he said quietly. But you have no idea what really happened. The cryptic statement lingered in Reyes's mind as she drove back to San Diego. What had Horvath meant? Was he referring to the other disappearances, or something else entirely? The comment suggested depths to the case that remained unexplored. Back at headquarters, the team continued their methodical work. DMV records, employment histories, rental agreements, and credit card statements from the late 1990s were painstakingly reconstructed. A timeline of Horvath's movements between 1995 and 2000 gradually took shape, marked with the known locations of the 5 missing women, including Emily. The pattern that emerged was damning. Horvath had consistently lived or worked near the disappearance sites. His work schedule often placed him off duty on the evenings when the women vanished. In 3 cases, including Emily's, his employment had given him reason to be familiar with the victims' routines. Equally significant was what investigators found regarding Gabriel Ramirez. While his connection to Emily's murder was irrefutable, no evidence linked him to the other disappearances. He had been out of state during 2 of them and had solid alibis for another. If Horvath was involved in these crimes, he appeared to have acted alone before partnering with Ramirez for Emily's abduction. The implications were disturbing. Had Horvath been the true predator all along? Had he somehow manipulated or influenced Ramirez rather than the other way around? The narrative of Emily's case, which had seemed so clear after both men's confessions, began to blur at the edges. As spring arrived in San Diego, the investigation reached a critical juncture. The circumstantial evidence against Horvath was substantial, but still insufficient for new charges. What they needed was physical evidence connecting him directly to the missing women. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A retired crime scene technician, reading about the investigation in the newspaper, contacted the department with a revelation. During the original Leeson investigation, soil samples had been collected from the abandoned car, but never fully analyzed due to technological limitations. Those samples, along with other physical evidence, had been properly preserved in long-term storage. Modern forensic technology could now detect and analyze microscopic evidence invisible to investigators in 1997. The Cold Case Unit rushed the samples to the FBI's Advanced Forensic Lab, where specialists used techniques unavailable 2 decades earlier. The results stunned even the most experienced investigators. Pollen and mineral traces in the soil matched a unique composition found in only one location in San Diego County, a remote area of Cleveland National Forest, where Horvath had occasionally worked as a volunteer on trail maintenance projects. Armed with this connection, investigators obtained warrants to search the forest area. Cadaver dogs trained to detect human remains, even decades old, were brought in. After 3 days of methodical searching, the dogs alerted to an area near an old fire road, seldom used and overgrown with chaparral. The excavation proceeded with extreme care. Forensic archaeologists removed layers of soil, documenting every step. 3 feet down, they found the first human remains. By the end of the week, they had recovered bones from 4 distinct burial sites within a 100-yard radius. DNA testing would take time, but preliminary examination by the medical examiner confirmed the remains were female and had been buried for 15 to 25 years. The positioning and condition suggested deliberate burial rather than accidental death or animal activity. The discovery sent shockwaves through the San Diego law enforcement community and beyond. Local media reported on the forest graves with a mixture of horror and vindication. Horror at the scope of the crimes. Vindication that long-missing women might finally be identified and returned to their families. For Detective Reyes, the discovery brought both professional satisfaction and personal anguish. The case she had considered solved had expanded into something far more complex and disturbing. Emily Martinez was not Horvath's only victim, but one of potentially many young women whose lives he had ended. When confronted with the new evidence, Horvath's defense attorney requested a meeting with prosecutors. The pretense of innocence had become untenable. Horvath was willing to provide information about the forest graves in exchange for considerations regarding where he would serve his sentence. District Attorney Torres approached the negotiations with caution. While information leading to positive identification of the remains would bring closure to more families, she was reluctant to offer significant concessions to a man now revealed as a serial killer. The compromise reached allowed Horvath to serve his sentence in a medium-security facility with certain privileges in exchange for full disclosure about all his victims. He would face additional charges for each murder, ensuring he would never be released regardless of parole considerations from his original sentence. On a rainy afternoon in April 2020, Horvath provided a full confession in a recorded session attended by Detective Reyes, the district attorney, and representatives from neighboring jurisdictions. For 6 hours, he detailed a pattern of predatory behavior stretching back to 1995. According to Horvath, he had developed a methodology for selecting and stalking victims. Working in maintenance gave him access to apartment complexes, fitness centers, and office buildings throughout San Diego County. He would identify young women who lived or worked alone, learn their routines, and eventually abduct them using various ruses related to his maintenance work. In total, he confessed to the murders of 7 women, including the 4 found in Cleveland National Forest and Cynthia Leeson, whose remains he claimed were buried in another location he agreed to identify. Each disappearance had been carefully planned, with disposal sites selected to minimize discovery. Most disturbing was Horvath's description of his relationship with Gabriel Ramirez. Contrary to his original claim of being manipulated by the more aggressive Ramirez, Horvath admitted to deliberately cultivating the friendship, gradually introducing Ramirez to his voyeuristic activities and escalating their shared behavior until Ramirez was willing to participate in Emily's abduction. Gabriel was easy to influence, Horvath explained with chilling detachment. He had the same interests I did, but lacked the courage to act on them. I helped him overcome that hesitation. The revelation cast the Martinez case in an entirely new light. Emily had not been targeted solely because of Ramirez's obsession, but as part of Horvath's established pattern. He had essentially used Ramirez as a tool, manipulating him into becoming an accomplice, and then allowing him to take the primary blame after their capture. When the confession concluded, Reyes sat in her car in the prison parking lot, rain pounding on the roof as she processed what she had heard. The case had transformed from the tragedy of one young woman to a serial predator's years-long campaign of violence. The scales of justice would need to be recalibrated to account for this expanded understanding. The identification of the forest remains proceeded over the following months. DNA analysis confirmed the identities of Teresa Alvarez, Miranda Wong, and Jennifer Reeves. The 4th set of remains belonged to Diane Foster, a 24-year-old woman who had disappeared in 1995 and whose case had never been connected to the others. Following Horvath's directions, investigators found Cynthia Leeson's remains buried near a hiking trail in Anza Borrego Desert State Park. The location was so remote that without specific guidance, the site might never have been discovered. For 5 families, the discoveries brought the painful closure that the Martinez family had experienced 2 years earlier. Memorial services were held across San Diego County as communities gathered to honor lives cut tragically short and to support parents, siblings, and friends who had waited decades for answers. The expanded case garnered national attention. True crime documentaries and podcasts explored the San Diego stalker, as Horvath came to be known in media coverage. Law enforcement agencies across the country began reviewing their own cold cases for potential connections, though investigators eventually determined that Horvath's crimes appeared limited to San Diego County. For Detective Reyes, the case became a defining chapter in her career, but also a source of mixed emotions. While the resolution brought closure to multiple families, She struggled with the knowledge that different investigative approaches in the 1990s might have connected the disappearances sooner and potentially saved lives. "We missed patterns because each case was handled separately," she explained during a presentation at a national law enforcement conference. Jurisdictional boundaries, technology limitations, and communication gaps created blind spots that Horvath exploited. Her candid assessment led to systemic changes in how missing persons cases were handled across California. The state established a centralized database that automatically flagged similarities between cases, even those reported in different counties. Emily's protocols, originally championed by Ricardo Martinez, were expanded to include cross-jurisdictional notification requirements and mandatory pattern analysis for all disappearances. The San Diego Police Department formally acknowledged the investigative shortcomings of the original cases. Rather than assigning blame to individual officers, the department committed to institutional improvements, including specialized training for all detectives in recognizing patterns associated with serial offenders. In September 2020, as Horvath began serving multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole, the families of all 7 victims gathered for a unique memorial at Point Loma. The event, organized jointly by Maria Martinez and the mothers of the other victims, was not focused on the crimes or the perpetrator, but on celebrating the lives and potential of the women who had been lost. Each family released biodegradable paper lanterns over the ocean at sunset, the lights drifting out over the Pacific like stars fallen to earth. For the families, it represented both an acknowledgement of loss and a step toward healing, a shared experience that no one had chosen, but that had forged unbreakable bonds among them. "We are connected by tragedy," Maria told the gathered crowd, her voice steady despite the emotion of the moment. "But we choose to be united by love and remembrance. Our daughters were more than victims. They were bright, beautiful women with dreams and gifts this world never got to fully see." The memorial concluded with the announcement of the 70 Stars Foundation, created by the families to advocate for improved handling of missing persons cases and support for the families left behind. The foundation would provide resources for law enforcement training, fund specialized search technologies, and offer counseling services for those navigating the unique pain of having a loved one disappear. For San Diego, the resolution of these long-dormant cases prompted community-wide reflection. The city had always prided itself on being one of America's safest major metropolitan areas, its finest city nickname reflecting not just its perfect weather and beautiful coastline, but its quality of life. The revelation that a serial predator had operated undetected for years challenged that self-perception. Rather than retreating into fear, however, the community responded with increased vigilance and mutual support. Neighborhood watch programs expanded, universities enhanced their safety measures and escort services. The city invested in improved lighting for parks, beaches, and campus areas. Most importantly, there was a cultural shift in how safety concerns were addressed. Where once warnings to young women had often focused on restricting their movements or activities, the emphasis now shifted to community responsibility, bystander intervention, and the importance of reporting suspicious behavior. As 2020 drew to a close, Detective Reyes stood on the bluff at Point Loma, looking out at the same ocean view where the families had released their lanterns months earlier. The case that had consumed so much of her professional life had finally reached its conclusion. Justice served as fully as the system allowed. The 7 young women could never be returned to their families. Their potential contributions to the world, Emily's marine biology research, Teresa's planned medical career, Cynthia's ambitions in journalism, would remain forever unrealized. But their stories had created lasting change, in how missing persons cases were handled, potentially saving future lives. For Reyes, that legacy represented the best possible outcome from such profound tragedy. Standing at the edge of the continent, watching the sun sink toward the horizon in a blaze of orange and pink, she made a silent promise to the women whose cases she had helped resolve. Their stories would continue to matter, their impact extending far beyond the darkness that had claimed them. The ripple effects of the Horvath case continued to spread throughout San Diego and beyond, well into 2021. What had begun as the resolution of a single cold case had evolved into a comprehensive re-examination of how missing persons investigations were conducted nationwide. Emily Martinez and the 6 other victims had become catalysts for change, their tragic stories transforming law enforcement practices and community safety approaches across the country. In January 2021, Detective Samantha Reyes received an unexpected invitation from the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. The Bureau's Behavioral Analysis Unit had been studying the Horvath case as part of their ongoing research into predatory patterns and wanted Reyes to present her insights at a national conference on cold case methodology. "Your work connected dots that remained separate for decades," the invitation read. "We believe your approach offers valuable lessons for investigators everywhere." For Reyes, the recognition was both gratifying and humbling. Her investigation had succeeded largely because of technological advances unavailable to earlier detectives. Still, the opportunity to share what she had learned might help other investigators identify patterns sooner and potentially save lives. On a crisp February morning, Reyes stood before an auditorium filled with hundreds of law enforcement professionals from across the country. Behind her, a screen displayed photographs of all 7 victims, not crime scene photos or missing person flyers, but the vibrant images their families had shared, showing the women as they had lived rather than as victims. These 7 women never met each other in life, Reyes began, her voice steady but emotional. Yet their stories became intertwined through one man's actions and eventually through our investigation. Today, I want to talk about what we missed for 20 years and what finally brought these cases together. For the next hour, she detailed the investigation's evolution from Emily Martinez's disappearance to the discovery of the forest graves. She emphasized the technological advances that had made the connections possible, but also highlighted the human elements, the importance of revisiting witness statements, the value of maintaining evidence properly for future testing, and the critical role of cross-jurisdictional communication. The most important lesson from this case isn't about DNA technology or forensic archaeology, she concluded. It's about seeing patterns. Horvath didn't just appear one day and decide to abduct Emily Martinez. He developed his methodology over years, refining his approach with each victim. The signs were there, scattered across multiple jurisdictions and case files. We just didn't have the systems in place to connect them. The presentation resonated deeply with the assembled investigators. Many approached Reyes afterward, sharing similar cases from their own jurisdictions and discussing how the patterns she identified might apply to their unsolved disappearances. Several agencies requested copies of the Emily's protocols to implement in their departments. Meanwhile, back in San Diego, the Seven Stars Foundation was gaining momentum. Led by Maria Martinez and the mothers of the other victims, the organization had secured significant funding from both private donors and government grants. Their mission had expanded beyond advocacy to include practical support for investigations and families. The Foundation's first major initiative was funding specialized training for search and rescue teams across California. Using advanced techniques and equipment, these teams would be better equipped to locate remains in challenging terrains similar to where Horvath had hidden his victims. The program was named Operation Lighthouse, a beacon of hope for families still searching for missing loved ones. In March 2021, the foundation partnered with the San Diego Police Department to create a dedicated cold case volunteer corps. Retired detectives, forensic specialists, and research professionals donated their time and expertise to review unsolved disappearances, looking for patterns and connections that might have been overlooked. The corps' first success came in April, when they identified similarities between 3 apparently unrelated disappearances from the early 1990s. The cases predated Horvath's known activities, but shared distinctive elements that suggested a single perpetrator. With this new perspective, investigators reopened the cases and discovered evidence linking them to a man who had died in prison while serving time for an unrelated assault. Though the perpetrator could never be brought to justice, the families of those victims finally received the answers they had sought for nearly 30 years. At a private ceremony, they thanked the volunteer corps and particularly Maria Martinez, whose advocacy had created the program. Maria turned her pain into purpose, one mother said, embracing her. She couldn't save her daughter, but she saved us from a lifetime of wondering. For Ricardo Martinez, now struggling with advancing heart disease, the foundation's work represented a different kind of healing. Though he participated less in public events, he remained deeply involved in the organization's governance, bringing his engineering background to bear on developing systematic approaches to case review. When Emily disappeared, I felt powerless. He confided to Reyes during one of her regular visits. Nothing in my education or career had prepared me for that kind of helplessness. Now, I can use my skills to build something that might spare other families what we experienced. It doesn't fill the hole in our lives, but it gives that emptiness a purpose. The Martinez family's resilience inspired others beyond the foundation. SDSU's Marine Biology Department, recognizing the impact of Emily's story, expanded the scholarship program bearing her name. What had begun as financial support for one student annually grew into a comprehensive initiative funding research positions, equipment, and conservation projects along the San Diego coastline. Each year, the department hosted Emily Martinez Day, when scholarship recipients presented their research to the community and the Martinez family. These events became celebrations of potential realized, the scientific contributions Emily might have made herself given the chance, now carried forward by others in her name. Sophia Chen, Emily's friend from that fateful night in 1998, became a regular attendee at these events despite her demanding legal career in Los Angeles. In September 2021, she announced a major decision. She was leaving corporate law to join the Seven Stars Foundation as their legal director, focusing on policy reform related to missing persons cases. For 20 years I carried the weight of that night, Sophia explained when asked about her career change. I was the last friend to see Emily alive. I watched her walk to her car. Now I can channel that experience into protecting others, making sure the systems work better for the next Emily. The foundation's influence continued to grow throughout 2021, expanding from California to neighboring states. Maria Martinez became a powerful voice in legislative hearings, speaking with quiet authority about the changes needed in law enforcement practices, victim support services, and public safety education. Her testimony before a Senate committee in October 2021 led to the introduction of the National Missing Persons Response Act, which would standardize protocols across state lines and establish a centralized database with advanced pattern recognition algorithms, essentially implementing Emily's protocols at the federal level. My daughter disappeared in 1998, Maria told the committee, her voice steady despite the emotion visible in her eyes. Technology that might have saved her existed then, but the systems to connect the dots did not. This legislation won't bring back Emily or any of the others, but it might prevent the next mother from spending 20 years waiting for answers. The legislation gained bipartisan support, with lawmakers from across the political spectrum recognizing the practical value of improved coordination in missing persons cases. By December 2021, the bill had passed both houses of Congress and awaited the president's signature. As the year drew to a close, Detective Reyes faced her own important decision. After the national recognition of her work on the Horvath case, she had received numerous job offers, including prestigious positions with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit and private consulting firms specializing in cold case resolution. The opportunities were tempting, offering higher salaries and broader influence than her current role. Yet Reyes hesitated. The San Diego Cold Case Unit had become more than a job to her. It was a mission, a place where she could directly impact lives in the community she called home. After weeks of consideration, she declined the external offers and instead proposed an expansion of San Diego's Cold Case Unit to include a training division. The department, recognizing the value of her expertise and the positive publicity generated by the Horvath case resolution, approved the proposal. "I can help more investigators by staying here and sharing what I've learned than by leaving," she explained to her team. "Plus, there are still cases in our files waiting for answers. I'm not finished with San Diego yet." The expanded unit quickly became a model for departments nationwide. Detectives from other jurisdictions traveled to San Diego for intensive training in cold case methodology, returning to their communities with new skills and perspectives. Within the first 6 months of 2022, Reyes's training program had directly contributed to the resolution of 14 long unsolved cases across the country. Meanwhile, the Seven Stars Foundation continued its work, expanding beyond advocacy and training to include direct support for families of missing persons. Understanding the financial strain these situations could create, the foundation established emergency funds to help families maintain their search efforts without risking financial ruin. "When someone disappears, life doesn't stop," Maria explained during a fundraising event. "Bills still come due. Children still need care. Jobs still demand attention. We can't remove the emotional burden, but we can help ease the practical challenges." The foundation also created support groups specifically for siblings of missing persons, recognizing that these family members often received less attention and support despite their profound loss. Emily Martinez, Emily's sister, who had lived in her shadow both before and after the disappearance, led this initiative with insight born from personal experience. "For 20 years, I was the sister of the missing girl," Lucia shared during the program's launch. "People asked about my parents, about Emily, but rarely about how I was coping. We want to create a space where siblings can acknowledge their own grief while also supporting the family's broader journey." The Seven Stars Foundation quickly became a trusted resource for law enforcement agencies across the country. When new disappearances occurred, local departments would contact the foundation for guidance on working with families, managing media attention, and organizing community searches. This collaborative approach bridged gaps that had historically existed between official investigations and family-led efforts. In April 2022, the foundation faced its most significant test when a 22-year-old student disappeared from a Northern California University campus. The local police department, unfamiliar with missing persons cases of this nature, contacted the foundation for assistance. Emily Martinez and 2 other foundation leaders traveled to the campus, bringing with them the expertise gained through their own painful experiences. They helped the family navigate those crucial first hours and days, establishing effective communication with investigators, organizing volunteers, and managing the intense media interest. 10 days into the search, volunteers trained using the Foundation's protocols discovered evidence in a remote area that led to the student's rescue. She had fallen during a solo hike and been trapped in a ravine, injured but alive. Medical personnel credited the quick recovery and the Foundation's methodical search approach with saving her life. The successful rescue garnered national attention, highlighting the Foundation's vital work and the ongoing impact of Emily Martinez's case. Applications for the Foundation's training program surged, with community groups across the country seeking to establish similar volunteer response teams in their areas. For Maria and Ricardo Martinez, the rescue represented a profound moment, the first time their daughter's legacy had directly saved a life. Though Emily herself could never be returned to them, her story had created ripples of change that now offered another family the reunion they had been denied. As summer arrived in San Diego, the city prepared for a significant memorial event. August 12, 2022 would mark the 24th anniversary of Emily Martinez's disappearance and 4 years since the resolution of her case. The Seven Stars Foundation, in partnership with the city government, planned a dedication ceremony for a permanent memorial honoring all 7 victims. The chosen location was a scenic bluff in Point Loma, overlooking the Pacific Ocean that Emily had so loved studying. The memorial featured 7 stone benches arranged in a semicircle facing the water, each engraved with a victim's name and a quote that reflected her dreams or personality. At the center stood a simple plaque explaining the case's significance and its impact on missing persons investigations nationwide. On the morning of the dedication, hundreds gathered at the site. The families of all 7 women were present, along with investigators who had worked the cases, volunteers from the Foundation, and community members touched by the story. Detective Reyes stood quietly at the back, preferring to let the families remain the focus of the day. Maria Martinez, now recognized across the country for her advocacy work, approached the podium as the ceremony began. The years had silver all of her hair and deepened the lines around her eyes, but her posture remained straight, her voice clear and resolved. 24 years ago today, our daughter Emily left a friend's graduation party and never came home, she began, gazing out at the assembled crowd. For 2 decades, we lived in the purgatory that only families of the missing truly understand, suspended between hope and grief, unable to move forward or back. She gestured toward the other families seated in the front row. Each of these families lived in that same purgatory, some for even longer than we did. When the truth finally emerged, it brought both the pain of confirmed loss and the relief of ended uncertainty. Maria paused, looking toward the ocean stretching to the horizon. This memorial honors 7 young women whose lives were cut short by violence. But it also represents something more, the beginning of change. From these 7 tragedies came advances in how missing persons cases are investigated, how families are supported, and how communities respond. She introduced each family, inviting them to stand as their daughter's name was called. Despite the solemnity of the occasion, there was a sense of solidarity and even healing in their shared experience. These 7 stones face the ocean Emily loved, Maria continued. They represent permanence in the face of loss, remembrance despite the passage of time. When you sit here, watching the waves or the sunset, we hope you'll think not just about what was taken, but about what has been created in response. Ricardo Martinez, now using a wheelchair due to his heart condition, joined his wife at the podium. Despite his physical frailty, his voice carried clearly across the gathered crowd. "Engineering taught me that for every action there is a reaction," he said, his hand resting on Maria's. "The action that took our daughter was born of darkness and cruelty. But the reaction, what all of you have helped build in response, comes from light and compassion. That is the true legacy of these 7 women." The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence as 7 white doves were released, soaring over the ocean in the bright summer sunlight. As the crowd dispersed, many lingered at the benches, reading the inscriptions and taking in the peaceful vista. Emily's bench, positioned to catch the sunset perfectly, bore a quote from her college application essay: "The ocean teaches us that what appears as emptiness is actually teeming with life just beneath the surface. In science and in humanity, we must look deeper than first glance." Detective Reyes approached the bench after most attendees had left. Running her fingers over the engraved words, she reflected on how Emily's insight applied to the investigation itself, how the apparent emptiness of a decades-cold case had indeed contained life and truth, just waiting to be discovered. As she stood there, Maria Martinez joined her, the two women sharing a moment of quiet contemplation before the endless horizon. "Thank you," Maria said simply, "not just for finding Emily, but for never letting her become just another file in storage." Reyes nodded, emotion tightening her throat. "In our work, it's easy to focus on the perpetrators, analyzing their patterns, tracking their movements. But you and the Foundation have reminded us all that the victims are the ones who truly matter. Their stories deserve to be central." They stood in companionable silence, watching seabirds wheel against the blue sky. After a moment, Maria spoke again, her voice reflective. "When Emily first disappeared, I thought the not knowing was the worst pain possible," she said. "Then when we learned the truth, I thought surely that was the bottom of grief. But what I've come to understand is that loss doesn't have a bottom. It changes shape over time, but it remains with you." She turned to face Reyes directly. "What makes it bearable is purpose. Emily's death destroyed one future, but created another. Not the one we would have chosen, but one with meaning nonetheless." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting golden light across the water, the two women were joined by others. Sophia Chen, Lucia Martinez, members of the Foundation, investigators who had worked the case. They gathered informally around Emily's bench, sharing memories and updates on the Foundation's work. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by both laughter and tears. These people, brought together by tragedy, had formed bonds that transcended their painful connection. They had transformed collective grief into collective action, individual loss into community gain. As evening approached, Ricardo was wheeled to join the group, a blanket across his lap, despite the mild temperature. His health had declined significantly over the past year, but his mind remained sharp, his commitment to their shared mission unwavering. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice softer than it once had been, but still carrying the engineer's precision. 24 years ago, we lost Emily. 4 years ago, we found her. In between, there were 20 years of darkness. But look at what's grown from that darkness." He gestured to the group around him, to the memorial benches, to the Foundation materials visible in many attendees' hands. "This is Emily's legacy, not just her own life, which was beautiful but too brief, but all of this. The lives saved, the families spared, what we endured, the changes in how these cases are handled." As the sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant orange and pink, the group fell silent, watching nature's daily farewell. For many present, it seemed a fitting metaphor, beauty emerging from departure, light most vivid at the moment of transition. Detective Reyes, standing slightly apart, observed the Martinez family surrounded by the community they had built from tragedy. In her years of law enforcement, she had seen many victims' families destroyed by grief, relationships shattered under the weight of loss and blame. The Martinezes had chosen a different path, not without pain, certainly, but one that transformed suffering into service. As darkness finally fell over the memorial site and the first stars appeared above the ocean, the gathering began to disperse. Promises to meet again soon, to continue the work, to keep the memory alive. These words passed between them as they departed. The 7 stone benches remained, solid in the gathering night, facing the vast ocean with its endless rhythms of departure and return. They would stand as silent witnesses to both what had been lost and what had been created, markers not just of endings, but of new beginnings born from the darkest of circumstances. In the years that followed, countless visitors would sit on these benches, some who knew the story intimately, others who discovered it through the memorial plaque. Many would find comfort in the peaceful setting, drawing strength from the knowledge that even the most profound darkness can ultimately yield to light. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.